Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we got a few Andor questions, very fitting considering tonight is the finale, the final 3 episodes. I should have my review for them up sometime late tonight, early tomorrow, depends on where you are in the world, I suppose. Anyway, let's get right to the questions, and the first one comes to us from Comrade Commissar Yuri, who asked, "Hey Thor, do you think Luthen selected Cassian to be the one to protect Mon Mothma on her way out of the Senate because he had the skill set or because Cassian keeps coming through when he needs him?" And I think it's a bit of both. I think Cassian has become his most trusted asset, probably the one he's put the most amount of time and effort and sort of training into, as well as the fact that, yeah, Cassian does keep coming through time and time again, which he mentions when he's giving him the mission, sorta, or mentions when they're discussing it. And this is another time, the second time after the Force healer we saw in one of the previous episodes in this arc. But it's kind of the second time the show begins to dip its toes into some Force-related stuff or beliefs, or maybe the third. We do have that Kyber crystal back in Season 1, which also belonged to Luthen. Which is very curious because we still don't know what Luthen's backstory is. We may get it in tonight's episodes. I think we will. They said they were going to give us some, and, well, we haven't gotten any yet, so it's either tonight or they lied to us. But it is curious that when he's talking to him again in this 9th episode before the mission, that he's like, you are always right where you need to be, right where I need you to be. You sort of have this way about you, this way of finding your place to where you need to be. You kind of have a destiny, which goes back to what the Force healer was telling Bix and trying to tell Cassian too. And of course Cassian rejects this destiny. But again, the fact that Luthen is kind of putting the pieces together and seeing this as, again, I think he's saying he sees this as something special, that Cassian, again, is always where he needs to be, that he has a destiny, that this is probably Force related, right? I think it is telling us that Luthen has something to do with the Jedi, and I'm not saying he used to be one. I'm not saying anything like that. I don't think that is going to be the case. My theory has been that Luthen has, for a very long time, and dating back to into the prequel era, he has been a collector of Jedi memorabilia, of antiquities and the sort. He probably had himself a nice collection. I think it's clear that Luthen has been playing the antiquities game for a while. It is not just a cover he picked up in the last 15 years, and he's been using his shop as a sort of front and all of that. I think it's been something in his, maybe in his family, I don't know, but it's been something that he has been doing for a long time. Again, collecting and selling antiquities, and I think his most prized possessions, or one of them, was that Kyber crystal he gave to Cassian back in Season 1. Again, my theory is that he has been a collector of Jedi stuff for a long time, and then once the Empire took over, they declared it all as kind of contraband, and they came and confiscated his stuff, and he's been pissed. And that is what has set him down his path of vengeance to take down the Empire, because they took away what he cared about the most, which was his possessions, which is kind of ironic because you could say that is a Sith quality, right? But anyway, I do think there is a connection, a soft connection, you could say, between the Jedi and Luthen, or maybe it is something a bit more concrete. Maybe he did know some Jedi back in the day. That's very likely. He's on Coruscant. He may have been the biggest collector of Jedi antiquities in the galaxy, for all we knew, or one of the biggest, so it's possible that he has a lot of knowledge, that the Jedi from time to time came to his shop and asked him questions, or he was allowed in the temple. We don't know. But I really do think there is something there. Again, I think that scene where he's kind of putting together how important Cassian has been to him and to the rebellion, that he's always succeeding on these crazy missions, he's always there when he needs him. I think there is a history there connected to the Jedi. Again, I don't think it's anything like he is a Jedi or he married one or anything quite like that. I've seen a lot of theories like that. I think he's simply always been interested in them. He used to have a very fine collection, and he maybe had some friends in the Jedi Order, maybe some really good friends, and because of the Empire, he lost it all. And in a way, he's getting vengeance for the Jedi. That may be what is motivating him. But my theory is that one way or another, yes, he does have some sort of connection to the Jedi. Alright, and moving on, and kind of a related question, it comes to us from Geek News, who asked, "Hey Thor, I hope you read my entire comment before deciding I'm just a hater of the show. If Star Wars was my religion, I would have named the Gospel of Gilroy sacrilegious. I do not think the show fits Star Wars in its tone and its language. I went back to listen to the part of Mon Mothma's speech that was shown in Rebels, and the language was different. It was more Star Wars-like. But despite my lack of interest in watching this show, this was the only episode I've bothered watching myself, and it's a great episode. Also, you made the point against this show yourself when you said that Bail Organa should have said, "May the Force be with you," but instead they chose profanity. The writers of this show chose to make this show as un-Star Wars-y as they can. So, despite the show being more faithful to the lore than others, it still doesn't fit Star Wars. It is a great political thriller and sci-fi show, and if it didn't mask itself as Star Wars, maybe I would have given it a bigger chance. And first of all, I am not going to call you a hater. I seriously and genuinely mean it when you are free to like or dislike whatever you want, and I'm not going to get angry. We don't all have to love the exact same things. We can all still be Star Wars fans and discuss it like civilized people. That said, what I find rather curious about the most recent arc, or 7, 8, and 9, since the recent arc could be the one tonight, but what I found very curious is that for the first time, as I was kind of saying in response to the previous comment, this was really the first time we kind of delved into Force stuff, and it has felt like, for better or worse, like it, don't like it, that Gilroy and company have kind of not wanted to include it. Very intentionally so. And I don't think that is meant to be an insult against Star Wars that they don't like the Force stuff or think that makes it cheesy or hokey or whatever. I think it's more because they have really wanted to show the perspective of the common folk in the galaxy, what they are facing without having Force powers, without having a Jedi on your side. I think that's where the reluctance to show anything like that has come from. But now here at the end, whether by Gilroy's choice or maybe someone else influencing to make it that way, I think they're very much trying to imply that yes, in Star Wars, fate and destiny, the Force, it is all there, and Cassian seems to be a messenger, a vessel of the Force, the will of the Force, that he has a great purpose to fulfill. And again, whether by his choice or somebody telling him you gotta put it in there, they are embracing it here at the very end. Either way, I do agree that over the course of these 2 seasons, there are certainly things in here that feel very un-Star Wars-y, as you put it, or some of the verbiage feels off or more modern instead of more in-universe, you could say. Especially the use of real-life profanity, which I don't have a problem with that being in there, yet at the same time, I kind of wish they would have used in-universe profanity. I think that just would have been better. Maybe they felt that would have been cheesy, and the average person would have been like, what does that even mean? Anyway, I did find it a bit strange. I did make the comment that Bail said to Mon, go tear this stuff up in the Senate, basically, when I think that would have been the perfect time for the show to finally just say, may the Force be with you. I mean, one time in there just seems like maybe every Star Wars show should kind of at some point say one of those classic lines, like, I got a bad feeling about this, or may the Force be with you, whatever. Not a huge deal, but when you consider the character, when you consider Bail has had connections to the Jedi in the past, that he is hiding Leia for Obi-Wan and Yoda, even though, yes, he loves her and he thinks of her as a daughter, and that if you go by the book, The Mask of Fear, which is a recent book that is supposed to be related to Andor, it's kind of a prequel to Andor. In it, one of the main things that is motivating him is kind of redeeming the Jedi. He's mad that the Jedi are villains now, that they have been painted as villains by the Empire. And he is looking for evidence that says the Empire, the Emperor himself, has lied about them. Again, that is what is kind of motivating him in that book. And no, I don't expect that book to necessarily be perfectly aligned with the show here, even though, again, it claims to be an Andor prequel. But I do think for the character, I think it would have made sense to say, may the Force be with you to Mon. They obviously are both from the time of the Jedi. They have known Jedi. They were there during the Clone Wars and all of that. So it just kind of felt like the one time they really should have gone there and didn't. Not upset, just maybe a little disappointed. All right, and one final question here, and it comes to us from Callum Quinn Creates, who asked, hey Thor, one thought keeps coming back to me. Releasing Andor might be the worst mistake Disney has made with Star Wars. After botching every show and movie that mattered, Kenobi, Boba Fett, the sequels, they proved that good, no god-tier Star Wars is still possible. Now, every time I'm watching the mid-garbage they try to shove down our throats, as they call us every type of bigot imaginable, I'm going to think about how, should the leadership have been different, I could have been watching a sequel trilogy as good as Andor. Do you feel like this is a common feeling among the fans? And what do you think Disney could do to fix this? And I think it is maybe not necessarily a common feeling among all the fans, but I do think some fans will certainly share this sentiment where they're watching Andor, and whether or not you think it's classic Star Wars or not, it's a phenomenally well-written, well-crafted, well-acted, well-scored, well everything to show. Again, you could say it's a bad Star Wars show if you don't like that sort of thing out of Star Wars, but I don't know the argument could be made that it's a bad show. Anyway, my point is that yes, they are capable of creating something really, really good. Now, not everything needs to be exactly like Andor. I don't think the Kenobi show should have been just like Andor. I don't think the sequel should have been just like Andor. And I don't think you're suggesting that. I think you're just suggesting that the quality of Andor should have been there, even if it is something very different. And that I absolutely agree with. It is frustrating if you're going to try to go back and watch some of the old shows and see maybe not such a Andor effort put into them, like the Kenobi series. I think that for me, even though the sequels are probably the most disappointing thing we'll ever get out of Star Wars, just my opinion, again, maybe I love them, that's fine. But for me, they are probably the most disappointing thing, followed up by Kenobi, because he's just such a great character. He's one of the top 3 or 4 or 5 legacy characters in the whole damn franchise. One of the faces of the franchise, I think you could argue. And it just seemed like they put minimal effort into him and his show because they knew he was one of the top characters and that people were going to watch regardless. And so when you watch Andor, when you see the care and the thought and just the beautiful writing, and you're like, why can they do this here, but why didn't they do it with Kenobi? Or why didn't they do it with the sequels? And yes, it's a different writing team, it's a different everything. But you're like, why couldn't you find the people who could have made that show exceptional instead of making it average? And in a way, I do think Andor has kind of hurt Star Wars, because you will have people who say, so you put all the time and effort into Cassian, but you didn't do that for Kenobi. And that's obviously rather frustrating. As for how Disney can fix this, I think you need to continue to make things not like Andor, but with the same care and concern and thought and effort as Andor. You need to just make whatever you're making needs to be the best it can possibly be. I mean, that should go without saying, but here we are in a place where that maybe isn't quite so obvious to them. I really think, I've said it before, that when Disney purchased Lucasfilm, they thought every Star Wars fan just likes whatever you throw out there. Whatever we make, they're going to eat it up no matter what, and they have found out the hard way that that's not true. Alright, well that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below. Tell me what you think of anything or everything I had to say here in response to these questions, or ask a question for a future lightning response video. Just start your comment off with, "Hey Thor, ask your question," and I'll try to answer it in a future video. And with Andor coming to an end, I'll probably be doing a few more of these than I have been lately, as well as finally finishing my fan fiction Jedi project. That is going to happen soon after, I promise. But either way, take to the comments below, let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.